Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rapping with the Rep. I'm really happy to be here with our guest, Representative and Chair Sean Garballey. Representative Garballey chairs the House Committee on Global Warming. We're going to talk a little about the environment. Thanks for being here on our show.
Thanks for having me.
And let's start off right with your work on global warming. You know, we produced a pretty significant climate bill in the last session. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the bills that we did as this current session closes. But I think a lot of our viewers would be interested in talking about what we did with climate. And why don't we kick off with that conversation?
Well, Representative Gordon, thanks so much for having me on your show.
I'm Ken in Burlington. Though.
Well, whether you're Ken in Burlington, you're one of the most respected lawmakers at the State House and someone who really focuses on a whole lot of issues that make a positive impact on the communities of Burlington and Bedford. And I'm thrilled to be here with you. I chair the House Committee on Global Warming and Climate Change. And for the past two sessions, the Massachusetts House has really prioritized on legislation in driving climate change and addressing the needs of climate change, really moving on policy forward in the right direction. This past session, as you supported the bill, we really focused on a bunch of issues around offshore wind. So there were several it's a quite large bill, but several of the pieces have to, one, we want the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to lead the nation in producing and maintaining offshore wind in the Commonwealth. So that was the first thing that we went about, is here in the Commonwealth, can Massachusetts produce enough offshore wind to, one, help reach our climate goals here in Massachusetts, but also meet the climate goals of President Biden. We have an administration at the federal level that is welcoming states to move forward on addressing policy that helps move on and encourage certified offshore wind companies to come into our states. And here in Massachusetts, the legislation that we passed does a whole host of things in terms of removing the price cap, so encouraging certified offshore wind companies to move to Massachusetts and to produce clean energy to help meet our climate goals.
So the wind farms that we're talking about, so folks are clear, we're talking about 14 miles off of the coast of Martha's Vineyard. So these aren't places that you would see as you drive by or walk by.
You won't see them.
You won't see them.
You won't see them.
And they're going to produce enough energy to power Massachusetts for generations. And in fact, it will make Massachusetts one of the leading producers in the country. So, we discussed self-reliance on energy. We get there with this wind power that we're creating now. And like you said, by incentivizing the companies to do that is the path that they do it, and we provide the financial framework for that to get done.
President Biden has been and his administration have set clear guidelines for driving procurement of offshore wind across the country. And with the passage of this legislation that Governor Baker, that you voted for and worked hard for, and Governor Baker signed into law, Massachusetts is prized at making up 1/3 of this administration and Washington's goal for offshore wind for clean energy. That's amazing. The other thing the bill does, which is really critical when addressing clean energy, is grid modernization. We have an old grid, and to make sure that we can have more clean energy procured here in the Commonwealth, we need a grid that is modern. And so the pieces in that bill that deal with grid modernization is really going to be the driving force in making sure we can produce more clean energy in offshore wind.
Yeah, one of our greatest threats to our environment is vehicular pollution, what causes by our cars and our trucks. And we know that the industry is moving over toward more electric cars. what we really need is more stations, recharging stations. And so what this bill does is it really exponentially increases access to charging stations so that that industry can grow. So number one, charging stations so people don't feel hesitant about having an electric car. And number two, we have more tax credits and other incentives for people to be able to acquire them, both new and used. We hadn't had a program for used cars before. We do now on the federal level as well, so that it can hit other types of markets, so it's not so exclusive.
Absolutely, and that's why we really wanted to focus this legislation on infrastructure for vehicles and for offshore wind. And it allows tax credits for both those industries to come to the Commonwealth and to really flourish.
Yeah. Now, we recently passed an economic development bill that was signed by the governor into law. There was a lot of discussion before we passed it about bringing us back into session and what do we have to do. And we really showed that we are a collaborative body in the Massachusetts legislature. We can get things done. And it takes time to bring everybody to the table and collaborate. But when we do, we can. And so we passed this with some real important provisions in there. For Burlington, just for one, Burlington gets $100,000 to create a sort of neighborhoods within the town, walkable neighborhoods, and looking into that, because that brings it up to modernization and all of that. But statewide, we are looking at funding that's going to help our nursing homes. It's going to help seniors in various ways, and other challenged industries get back on their feet again.
Absolutely, and important investments in housing, and making sure we invest in affordable housing for seniors who want to stay in their homes, or for individuals who want to buy a home for the first time. There are important investments. In my role as the chair of the Climate Change Committee, we really focused on the legislation, but also in investing for the Economic Development Bill. What money can we get to help drive the bill forward? And we really focused, so in the Economic Development Bill that you worked so hard on during the summer, and that we finally were able to get to the governor's desk a couple of weeks ago or last week, we have over $500 million allocated for environmental infrastructure. So a lot of that funding will be to set up those charging stations around the infrastructure. So we're moving forward in our commitment on those issues, which are so important. We also invest in making sure that a lot of those resources go to gateway cities, to make sure that when we talk about clean energy, that it's accessible for low-income individuals across our Commonwealth, that is really, really important. And making sure that the money is available to cities and towns so that they can be able to get access through a competitive bid process, or a competitive grant process rather, to be able to use that money for solar, for grid infrastructure that you talked about earlier, right here in Burlington and in Bedford throughout your district.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many important items in that bill. One of the other things that we did was we passed funding for the life sciences industry, which is so important, like you said, here in Burlington and Bedford, also in Arlington, your district too. This whole area is just an incubator for smaller life sciences companies. But you saw what happened during the pandemic, during the COVID pandemic. The vaccines were made here in Massachusetts, manufactured here in Massachusetts, and distribution began here in Massachusetts. In fact, right here in our part of the state, we saved so many lives. And so we appropriated $300,000 to Northeastern to continue its research center here in Burlington so that we could continue on that path. We're saving lives, we're changing lives right in this area. I mean, I'm so proud to be from, right here, together in our districts, our collective districts that do this work.
And you're a very humble individual, but I think it really is important to highlight the great work that you did on this bill during the summer and really pushed to try to get all parties to come to the table. And that is included with other Democrats, Republicans, with the Senate, with the governor and the rest of his administration to make sure that we passed a bill that the people of Bedford, Burlington, and across the Commonwealth can be proud of.
Right. We were able to do that, and I appreciate you pointing that out. And we really do collaborate. I used that word earlier in the show. And that's what happens in the legislature. We bring everybody to the table so that when we come to that consensus, we can get these things out. And,
Well, it's
and we
one
do
of the
that.
reasons you're one of my favorite state reps, not just because I'm on your show, but because you don't come to the table with an ego. You fight for the people of your district. You are their voice at the State House, and you will work with anybody to get good things done. And that has always been your focus, which is what I always appreciate.
Well, I appreciate that, Representative. I want to talk about a bill that you have been fighting for 10 years now. At least I was there for 10 years, so it's 10 years to me, which is a bill that deals with inclusiveness and opportunities for students to obtain education, postgraduate education, post-high school education in our public colleges. Can you explain that, Bill?
Sure. So there is a program right now that has been operating for the past decade that I worked to get funding for during the budget process called the Massachusetts Inclusive Concurrent Enrollment Program. And about 14 public higher education institutions are involved. There's 29 altogether, so a little less than half, and this includes Middlesex Community College, but everything from community college to state universities to the UMass system that allows students with intellectual disabilities and or autism to go to college and just the same as their peers, to take college courses and to be part of the college community. For the past 10 years, in addition to that program, we have been working, as you alluded in your comments about the bill, to put it in statute, because the program has been running through an earmark in the budget that is only good as long as we're able to have the money to fund it. But what this does is it puts it in, codifies it into statute to make sure in Massachusetts, in all 29 public higher education institutions from community college, state universities, and UMass, students with intellectual disabilities and autism are able to go to college. And with your support, finally with the bill getting passed after 10 years and a lot of hard work and collaboration, I can say that Massachusetts is the first state in the country in law to open up the doors of our public higher education institutions for students with disabilities. And to me, this is one of the most important things we can do, and I honestly believe that this is as big of a moment as the original special education law that opened up public education K through 12 for students with disabilities. But with this one, we are opening up the doors to public colleges here in the Commonwealth.
I mean, really, it is so important because the communication, the message that these students get is that they have this opportunity to move on. And one of the parents from our district told me that they have 3 children. One is experiencing autism, and it's my brother, my sister, they get to go to college, but I don't. I don't have the opportunity, and now they do. And to give that sense of belonging, and again, that opportunity is so important. And I really appreciate the hard work that you and former Representative Santacandro really took the lead and fought for this and never stopped talking about it. And sometimes that's what it takes.
It's really about access, right? And my favorite, there's a lot of different parts of the bill we can be proud of, but my favorite part is in section 2, which clearly highlights now in law that students with intellectual disabilities can't be denied acceptance into a public higher education institution solely because of that individual's disability. That's really, really important. And I want to thank you, Ken, for being at the, first of all, every time the bill has come before the Committee on Higher Education, you've testified in favor of it, and with your constituent. And I have really appreciated that. And so last week, when Governor Baker signed the bill into law in what we call a ceremonial bill signing, you were there with your constituent. And I'm just so grateful to you for your support of the bill and your work on the bill, and I'm grateful for you being at the bill signing to celebrate with all of us. It was we had over 100 people.
Right.
And it was so great to be there with everybody.
Very important day. Another bill that you worked on is access to birth records. Talk about that one. Congratulations on getting that bill signed into law. You had a good session.
I had a good session, just like you do. Every session is a good session for you, Ken, as you know. Paid family medical leave comes to mind, but we're grateful for your leadership. So this one has to do with your birth certificate. So before the bill was passed and signed into law by Governor Baker, individuals that were adopted in the Commonwealth and born in the Commonwealth and adopted between the years of 1968 and 2008 couldn't gain access to their original birth certificate. But individuals adopted and born in the Commonwealth before 1968 and after 2008 could gain access to their original birth certificate. So we unfortunately created a donut hole where you had three types of people. Individuals that weren't adopted that could gain access to their original birth certificate, those who were adopted and can get access to their original birth records, and those who were born within that 33-year gap who were basically shown the door and told that their record doesn't matter. And to me, it's important to, if you're adopted, you understand this, but that birth certificate, that's you, right? That is the document that allows you to have proof that you exist, right? The document, it's you, and that is your identity, and that it's so important. So we've been working on that bill for a long time. So now anyone born and adopted in the Commonwealth can gain access to their original birth certificate. And we passed the bill a few months ago, and last Monday, the bill officially was implemented. And so now those who are adopted can get their original birth certificate. And I've been hearing from really hundreds of adoptees around the Commonwealth, just letting me know that they got their original birth certificate and that it's so meaning to them. And it's not just their identity, right? It's who they are, right? But it's also for public health reasons.
Right.
It's important for you to have records, so in terms of your own public health, in terms of what you should be doing to take care of yourself. So it's a great bill, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I can imagine if there was any opposition to it, it was on a privacy. What was the opposition, if any?
It was concern around privacy of the mother.
Yeah.
But the truth is, and we were the last state in New England to pass this into law. And Ohio, so many other states have done it. So we had a lot of the experience of other states that dealt with some of these privacy concerns, and the sky didn't fall. And we didn't hear about stories of concerns around privacy being realized. The other thing is, you have every DNA company, like 23andMe. If someone wants to find someone that matches their DNA, they're going to be able to do so. That's not what this bill was about. This was about giving adoptees their identity.
Right. It would seem to me that the adopted child has as much rights in this instance to things like their health records than a privacy issue on behalf of a parent.
It's also important to remember that that parent has a birth certificate as well.
Right.
This is the child's birth certificate. Right. It's not the parents. Just like, you have your birth certificate and your parents have their birth certificate, right?
Yep. Yeah. So thank you for working on that. And it has been an important session. Just about a week ago, maybe just a few days ago, in fact, in a bill that I've been working on for also longer than it should have taken, probably 10 years, was signed by the governor. And this deals with local cultural councils. We you have, Representative, you have supported the Mass Cultural Council with funding in the budget every year, every time the budget will come out, there'll be an appropriation for the Mass Cultural Council, and you and I will sign on to an amendment asking for more money, because we know that the arts and the humanities are so important to our area, not just because it's nice to enrich people's lives by having access to public art around them, but also it's a matter of economic interest and economic development in our area. Companies come here for the culture of Massachusetts, and we realize that. So these local cultural councils are appointed by, in our case, in our towns, the select board, group of volunteers that are willing to go through grant applications every year and sort them out. See, do they qualify, don't they? And then accept monies coming from the Mass Cultural Council, small amounts of monies, a few $1,000s. Well, I served on the Bedford Cultural Council. I chaired it before I was elected to the legislature. When I was elected, I learned that there was a law in place that prevented any elected official from serving on one of these councils. It's hard now to get people to participate, to volunteer for these boards. It's rewarding, but sometimes it's hard to fill. In our towns, there are openings for these boards. And so I thought there was really no reason that we should exclude someone, for example, the library trustee, who, that's very important. Cultural council is important. Why can't they do both? There's no conflict there. And many other elected positions, there's no conflict, unless it's the actual select board, the people actually doing the appointment. So what this bill does is it just opens the opportunity to someone in town, so that if they want to be both on the regional school committee and then volunteer to do the cultural council work, they can do that. It really kind of makes no sense to keep them off. And it's a bill that I really didn't get much opposition to, but it was Governor Baker this year, the Senate and the House, just realized that the time has come to open up that opportunity, so we were able to get that in. That's what happens at the end of the session.
Thank you for your great work, and that is what happens at the end of session, but it is what happens at the beginning and the middle of your hard work and testifying in favor of it, talking to your colleagues and collaborating about the bill, that is able to help get the bill passed. Because as you know, it's got to go through the House, through the Joint Committee, then the Senate, then the governor's desk. It takes a long time, and I really appreciate your focus on the cultural councils, because it is a little money compared to the rest of the budget, but it makes a profound impact. And the truth is, having an elected official with the ability to serve on the council could make a real positive impact on the projects that move forward, and making sure that it's a more inclusive process of reaching out to more people who want to be involved in our local arts council. So it really, you have made a tremendous difference on art and making it more accessible to so many people across our Commonwealth. So thank you for your hard work on the bill.
Yeah, sometimes people ask us if they talk about how we go out of session or in session, is the legislature in session, and really it's a bit of a misnomer, because we're still passing laws, we're still getting things done. It's just that we're not taking formal votes, and so there's certainly a deadline to take formal votes. That's very important, because that's when we've got to get everything out that either requires a vote by our Constitution or is controversial. But there are other things that are really important that we can pass, because we can just we can deal with any objections by just talking to anyone who might have one, and then pass.
I always cringe at the end of session on July 31st, I'm sure you do as well, when the newspaper or other parts of the media say, oh, the legislature is over, because it makes it seem we head to Lake Winnipesaukee or down to Newport or Cape Cod, and that's it. And nothing could be further from the truth, because we're literally working throughout the month of August until the end of December, trying to get our bills passed. And as you know, I preside over informal sessions on Mondays and Thursdays. Under the Constitution, the legislature needs to be in session every 72 hours. And so session is still, as you put, Ken, is still happening, and we're still getting great bills passed. We just passed the step therapy bill to protect individuals with multiple sclerosis to make sure they can't get kicked off a medication that's working for them. That was a huge bill that we just got done.
And that you had a lot to do with, a whole lot to do with.
And we just got that done in informal session. Your bill on empowering arts councils just got done in an informal session, and the economic development bill that is going to put necessary money to our cities and towns across the Commonwealth just got done in an informal session because we're still working. We're just not taking any roll call votes. And by the way, in an informal session, all it takes is one member of the House or the Senate to question the vote of a roll call or question the quorum, and so everything would be shut down. So to get things passed, we need to collaborate. We need to work with everybody in the legislature to move things forward, and fortunately we do.
Yeah, and that's one thing, again, about our legislature that is, it's refreshing because we read so much about what goes on nationally. If a person does have a problem with a bill, they'll identify themselves. We'll know who it is. And so we'll call that person up and say, what is the objection? I had an experience with that recently. What is the objection? And I was told an objection to a bill. I said, well, actually, that was the subject of a compromise. Your concern has been met. They went back, double checked, that's true, came back, okay, my objection is withdrawn. The bill passed. And so that happens a lot. And it happens because we're willing to talk to each other. It doesn't matter that the person who objected had an R next to their name and I have a D next to my name. It doesn't matter. We just call each other up and talk. And sometimes it's the objection comes in and it's, you know what? That's actually a good point, a valid point. Let's what we call mend it on the fly or mend it on the floor. Let's change it a little bit. How about now? Okay. It makes it better. It makes a better law. And we can do that because we respect each other. We communicate with each other. And, you know, and that's the way it should work.
I think you're absolutely right. But not all lawmakers. I think that's important to point out that, and I want to bring this to you, because you were so respected in your position as a rep, as the chairman of public service. You work with so many different reps across the political spectrum, and a lot of reps don't do that. I think, you know, some do, successful ones do, but I think you're really a standalone rep who really, really works hard to engage with as many of his colleagues as possible, to really fight for the issues that are important to people here in Burlington and in Bedford and your other part of the district, to get things done. So I know you would quickly say every rep does it. No, not every rep does. You do it. And that's why we're so fortunate to have you at the State House, and that's why the people of Burlington and Bedford are so fortunate to have your leadership at the State House, and that's the truth.
Well, I really appreciate your kind words. And I think we've reached the end of our show, our Rapping with the Rep show. And before my head gets too big to get out of the BCAT studios, we will wish everyone a good night. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Sean, for coming
Thanks for
over.
having me.
And see you next time on Rapping with the Rep.